All right, I think we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to just wait for people to come in and allow time for people. Well, we have 18 people already signed in. If you're just jumping on, uh, please put in the chat box where you're coming in from and why you're here. And please definitely engage in conversation and get your questions ready to go. Again, thank you again for joining us today. We are 10 minutes, we're 10 a.m. In California, 10:01 right now. And again, we're going to allow more time for people to jump in. We got 33 people on the line. Let's give it a few more moments and we'll officially start the program. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our faculty and panelists here for joining us today and for agreeing to speak. I'm going to just throw up uh, a quick little promo for our programs here at Wiki Education. So if you're interested in teaching with Wikipedia, please feel free to visit teach.wikiedu.org. If you want to learn how to edit Wikipedia or Wikidata in our Scholars and Scientists program, where we engage subject matter experts in actually learning how to edit Wikipedia and Wikidata, please go to learn.wikiedu.org to learn more about that. Again, if you want to have your students contribute to Wikipedia in a class assignment, go to teach.wikiedu.org. Or if you want to have your institution that you are part of get more involved with Wikipedia and Wikidata, please go to partner.wikiedu.org. That is my slide for now. We're going to continue on with the show. Thank you again for everyone for joining us. So again, the chat is open. Please feel free to communicate with each other and during the session, share where you're coming in from and add any questions that you might have for our panelists in the Q&A. And so without further ado, my name is Andrés Vera. I'm the Equity Outreach Coordinator at Wiki Education. I oversee outreach to instructors that are brand new to teaching with Wikipedia and want to bring it into their classrooms to help their students impact a larger audience than just their class and just their classroom. And one of the reasons why I do my work at Wiki Education is because when students finish the program with Wiki Education and their instructors, they gain media literacy skills. They learn how to discern fact from fiction in a time when misinformation is rampant. According to the World Economic Forum, misinformation is the #1 threat to our society and to our world in the next 2 years. So this is why I do my work at Wiki Education, because students gain these critical skills. And so that's why I do my work. I'm going to pass it on to Margaret. Margaret, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Galvan. I'm at the University of Florida in the English department. So in terms of Wikipedia, I've been teaching with Wikipedia on and off for the past 7 years since I've been here. When I was in grad school, everyone's like, oh, teaching with Wikipedia is great, but it's really difficult. I'd say, the Wiki EDU platform makes it really easy. They have modules where you learn about Wikipedia throughout this semester. You can sort of adapt it to the class, which makes it really great. So I use it primarily in a queer comics course. My students learn about the history of cartoonists making comics about their lived experience. And so I choose, through my own research, this is something I researched myself and have a collection of. I'm going to just pop a link in the chat so you can see sort of where we ended up. But I choose a list of cartoonists who are underrepresented or unrepresented on Wikipedia, primarily from the 80s and the 90s. I have comics from those people that I bring into the classroom. And so the students are engaged in primary research and recovery at either improving a page or creating a page. But as you'll see, if you go on to the link I sent, you'll find a lot of dead links because a lot of work that they did was, my students did actually was challenged as not notable enough by other Wikipedians. And so that's, as sad as it is, it's also something for us to think about in terms of what counts as notable within LGBTQ subcultures and LGBTQ history. And sometimes it takes, a second student to come in and do it again for it to stick or someone to not notice it. So I'm really excited to be here to talk with you all about how you use Wikipedia in your classes.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Juana Maria, please take it away.
Hello, so my name is Juana Maria Rodriguez. I'm a faculty member, I'm professor in ethnic studies at UC Berkeley. I've taught 5 classes with wiki.edu, and I looked up my statistics, and my students have added 235,000 words, more than 2,000 citations. They've authored 54 original pages and edited almost 500. And so to me, I build my classes around an annotated bibliography. I love working with wiki.edu. I build my classes around an annotated bibliography. And as Margaret was saying, a lot of times that's an opportunity for them to look at archives, local archives that they might not have considered before, gay and lesbian press. I teach in ethnic studies. So a lot of the pages that my students have worked on have been local LGBT activists, again, getting over that notable bar, but also documenting gay and lesbian bars that have closed due to gentrification. So I love working with wiki.edu. They really do make it so easy. Yeah, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Juana Maria. Dean, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I don't know how I follow Juana Maria's number of courses and amount of pages created, which is incredible. But I have taught, my name is Dean Allbritton. I am an associate professor of Spanish at Colby College, and I'm also the director of the Center for the Arts and Humanities here. And pardon me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold as well. But I have taught Wikipedia in my course called Queer Spain 3 times, and I also participated in the LGBTQ Wiki Scholars program in summer 2021, which I loved, and I definitely recommend. Really awesome program for learning how to do it, learning how to edit Wikipedia even more on your own. I first taught my first Queer Spain course that I taught Wikipedia in was in spring 2020, and I very quickly was like, I need more experience with this, and so I signed up for the LGBT Scholars program, and since then I've taught it a bunch, and I absolutely adore working with Wikipedia and we'll get into this, I know, in the questions, but just sort of the excitement that students have for this type of work is just really incredible, and the way that they feel like they're quote unquote actually doing something, as I hear a lot in my courses. But yeah, so I've done this now since spring 2020. The most recent course I taught was also Queer Spain in fall 2023. So very excited to be here and to chat and to learn with you all.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. And Dan, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Royles, and I am currently an associate professor of history at Florida International University in Miami, but only through the end of the summer. In the fall, I'm starting a new position at Binghamton University, which is formerly known as SUNY Binghamton. Same thing, associate professor of history, but I teach mainly modern US, African American, and LGBTQ history. I am a kind of outlier on this panel in that I have not taught with Wikipedia, but I did the same summer scholar workshop that Dean did in a different year in 2022, where the entry that I edited, which is on an activist named Reggie Williams, was done by a student, I think possibly one of Maria's students, because it was somebody from Berkeley, and Reggie Williams is a Bay Area guy, or was a Bay Area guy. But I did that based on my own work, my own book, which is To Make the Wounded Whole, the African-American Struggle Against HIV and AIDS. I've done a lot of project-based teaching. I see a lot of the benefit or the utility of teaching with something like Wikipedia. And when I did the thing in the summer, it was kind of with the idea that I might do this in my own teaching at some point. I just haven't been in the classroom a lot for a variety of research and service reasons, but definitely something that I remain interested in doing in the future.
Thank you so much, Dan. Your expertise and your background is definitely super important to the work that we're doing at Wiki Education. And so, I want to just set the tone here as well for us as well. I we know that Wikipedia influences so many things in our society, so many parts of our society and our world. And to this day, and giving people access to knowledge is just one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal. And I really want to think about how, sort of think about how the future can be affected, or sort of like what do we hope for as as we continue doing this very important work, especially for LGBTQ plus people. So without further ado, let me ask. Then we get to the first question for Juana Maria. Juana Maria, what first convinced you to teach with Wikipedia?
Really a colleague mentioned that she was doing working with Wikipedia in relation to a project on prison abolition. And I thought, oh, this is a kind of interesting tool. But I think for me, what really convinced me was, I was in the classroom. I was teaching a kind of LGBT kind of pseudo history class, and we were reading an article about the Hoyas, the sort of queer gender nonconforming figures in the California mission system. And we found the Wikipedia page that discussed this mission in San Diego. And we read the story of this priest who was almost murdered by one of the Indians. And we had just read this article by Brian McCormick and talked about that case. And he was murdered because he beat these Indians daily. So what we added to that Wikipedia page was one line that said, he beats them daily. And we added that citation so that anyone going to that page now has another context for understanding the mission system, for understanding this supposed attempted murder, and has this great historical source that offers this other alternate history about gender nonconforming people in the California mission system. So that really opened my eyes to the power of it, and really was this kind of transformational moment in the classroom that I always sort of reflect back on.
Awesome. Does anyone? I have a follow-up question, and it's actually for Dan. Dan, what convinced you to take the LGBTQ Scholars course? What was the impetus for you?
I think two things. One, I'm interested in using Wikipedia in the classroom, and so like Dean, I want to kind of understand it better myself before I try to teach it to somebody else. I definitely in the past have gotten ahead of myself in terms of like using specific tools or platforms in teaching, and so for me, I feel just more comfortable if I kind of understand a tool before I bring it into the classroom. But the other thing is, understanding how important Wikipedia is for people, the way that people access knowledge. A lot of my work and my research and writing has been trying to kind of fill gaps in historical knowledge around communities that are multiply or kind of intersectionally marginalized. And so I saw it as a really useful way to do that, connecting work that I've been doing in the academy to like a much larger audience of people.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to the next question. This question is for Margaret. What was your students' reaction to editing Wikipedia articles about LGBTQ topic?
So they found it immensely a powerful experience. One thing I will say is I think if you're going to do this assignment, you need to like devote at least a week or so to actually reading about why to edit Wikipedia, reading about what it means to like edit in diversity, or thinking about queer issues in Wikipedia, thinking about even just like subtle ways, like like feminist women who like are talked about through their male partners. And so like you should like do a lot of reading about like why we do this on Wikipedia. I think that's something useful. But it really did change their views on Wikipedia and its rigor. So they think, oh, Wikipedia is something I can't cite, it's not rigorous. And then when they start to edit and have to add citations for every single sentence, it just really changes their ideas of it. It also, I think, helps them become better researchers and more incisive researchers, and think about how much research is behind every sentence. And, sentences aren't just fluff. They have to be something very direct. And so they also, because some of them also experience problems with their stuff being taken down or not being notable, I also say, the research is not based on whether it stays up, right? Because the Wikipedia EDU platform allows you to see like what they created in Sandbox. But so they also thought, in a negative direction, like the internet really isn't a place where everything is widely available, freely available for us to know about. There's a lot of like hidden history. And so it really sort of builds into, the course topic around LGBTQ cartoonists, and having sort of them think about that in a very applied and practical way. And they really, really appreciate the chance to do something where they feel like it's not just for me, not just for the other students, but something that's public facing. And it really gives them more impetus they work really, really hard on it.
Does anyone want to jump in on that? Why, Juana, what did your students feel, how has this changed their perspective as well?
I think, again, my students, to really they were able to really dive deep and learn so much about some of these minor figures. A lot of them worked on these really kind of minor local San Francisco queer and trans activists. And they just were able to really dive into that material and really become authorities on one thing. Maybe it's the history of a bar or a person or something like that. One thing I will say is that students don't know what they don't know. So there's a lot of upfront work as a professor finding, like, of course they know Gloria Anzaldúa and Sherry Moraga, but they don't know Diane Felix or Adela Vasquez. I had to give them those names for them to then go track those people down. So I think there's some upfront work that you have to do. I would frequently just kind of scour my sources. It's like, can I find 4 sources on this person before I suggest them as someone that they might investigate? But it did require them to sort of go into the ethnic media, go into LGBT press, and look for, they became really amazing researchers.
Awesome. Margaret, this question is again for you. How do you see this assignment complementing your other projects in your class?
Great. So this is something that goes throughout the class. So, we're reading about the larger history of queer comics. And so they're gonna, by sort of getting like an in-depth look at like one single artist, or some of them have done, I've had them do like, look at a series, a particular important series, and do the research on that. And so all of these sort of things tie back into our larger questions about thinking about issues of legacy, right? A lot of queer cartoons and comics, like, they've gone out of print. There's a fractured legacy, like certain generations don't remember what the next generation does. And so we can sort of think about those issues, and then they can actually participate in like the public work of recovery, right? Because this is my research area, I've done a lot of work in acquiring a lot of these comics. So I bring them in. I have, a huge Google Drive where I've shared things I've scanned with them. So I do a lot of work in making these comics available to them so they can work with these primary source materials. But then they also find lots of little bits on the web, and they find so many interesting things. And a lot of them also then just go really above and beyond what the course, they ultimately write a research paper that goes alongside and talks about the artists and talks about how they connect to other things we've been learning, and has them reflect about the process of editing Wikipedia. But this last year, I did, a few of them had interviewed their artists. And so I'll just drop this in the link. And so I said to the ones who just went above and beyond because they wanted to interview them, I said, we should get these published. And so I worked with them and edited these interviews, And we got them published together, as I said, and I talked about the experience of editing Wikipedia in the piece, as you'll see. But it's really powerful, really important, because one of the people a student interviewed was Hope Barrett, who edited this lesbian bisexual comics magazine in the 90s. Her interview or her Wikipedia page didn't stay up. It wasn't seen as notable enough, which is, BS, obviously. But she was very happy to see that her legacy would continue. And she disclosed to the student during the process of them doing an email interview back and forth that she was dying. And so she actually died and she passed away. But so this interview is really important because it preserves this legacy of this person who, is still not sort of recognized for her contribution. And so that's sort of like, the Wikipedia got us there, and then the students sort of took it to another place. And so there's, there are projects that build upon these projects, and it's not just about Wikipedia, but what Wikipedia facilitates.
That's awesome. I'm like, it's like kind of, that's what a weird and sort of like inspiring feeling, and I feel verklempt as well. It's definitely notability is something that underrepresented communities are consistently up against on Wikipedia. We know that 80 to 90% of contributors to Wikipedia identify as white men, and we're as we're working to make Wikipedia more reflective of our communities, it takes people like us and like you to really help give voices and to those people who are not represented in the wider context. And of course, also a lot of things that we talk about is also representation in just society in general as well. It's what we're this systemic representation that we're sort of fighting to have more of. Dean, this question is for you. What is your favorite part of teaching with Wikipedia?
Yeah, thanks. I want to like echo some of the things that Margaret and Juana Maria have already said, and just say that one of the very first things that my students always do, and this is like one of my favorite things about teaching it, that one of the very first things my students always say is some variation of, oh, in high school I was always taught that I can't use Wikipedia for like anything because it's always wrong. And the minute they start actually doing work in it, where they're like, wait, I have to cite everything I say, and they're kind of like, oh shit, this is not how I, sorry for cursing, but this is not how I, this is not how I write a research paper. I just sort of make claims sometimes, and they really, I love that transformation of like, actually like a really well written Wikipedia page needs some TLC and actually needs quite a bit of research and for verification of the truth, right? Like of facts. And they learn a different style of writing, which I think is so useful for them, which is fact-based, which is trying to get the information out there. They learn research skills of looking things up. They learn how, and all of this is available through the Wiki Edu program, which is absolutely incredible for them. It gives them all of these links and tips on how to do it. So I just love that moment for them of discovery of what Wikipedia can do and what it can offer, particularly groups that have been underrepresented throughout history.
Excellent. Oh, do you please, Juana?
I was going to say, I think the other thing that I would add to that is the fact that they're writing for a global audience. The fact that I frequently tell them, you're writing for, the father in Nigeria, or you're writing for a teenager in Romania. And so in terms of students, they can't jump to analysis. It's very sort of fact-based, which is not what they're used to. They're very, right? And so it actually gives them both a sense of the incredible resources that they have, everything that's kind of behind a paywall that other people don't have access to, that they can now make available to other publics. And so that sense of reaching out, speaking kind of to the world is, I think, really impactful for them. And some of them have, again, taken that extra step and translated pages, which again was, something that I would give them credit for, but was really just coming from their own desire to make this information more widely available.
Yeah, if I want to piggyback on that too, and just say,
Please,
like,
please.
in my Spanish class, where I give them the option of writing in English or in Spanish, and so deciding which version of Wikipedia they're editing. And I've had some of my Latinx students say, like, I actually want to write in Spanish, and then they'll translate an English page that exists into Spanish, or they'll fix, or edit a Spanish page, and vice versa. But I absolutely agree. I think one of my also favorite things that students say is they really feel like they've done something. That it feels like where theory meets praxis in a really powerful way for students, where they're saying, like, I'm not just researching or understanding the plight of the LGBTQ community or the lives of LGBTQ people throughout the world, but I'm actually making visible the invisible in a way that they feel sort of personally and ethically edified by. In it's just beautiful, I think.
Dan, I have a question for you. What did you take away from participating in the Scholars and Scientists program and contributing your expertise to LGBTQ history?
So I was, I think, in a little bit of the boat of what some students are in, or like the mindset that some students are in about, the reliability or unreliability of Wikipedia, and got an appreciation for how rigorous the work of editing a Wikipedia article can be. I'll drop a link to the article that I edited, which again I think was initiated by one of Juana Maria's students. But one of the things that I tried to do in that article was, like, Reggie Williams is an activist who worked kind of in community with lots of other people, and other folks from other communities, gay men communities of color. And so one of the things that I did in the article was just to name a lot of other people that he worked with, to try to kind of lay the groundwork for other people to come in and build on that entry into many other entries later on, because there are a lot of people who were notable in the San Francisco AIDS activist movement who are not represented on Wikipedia and should be represented on Wikipedia. So it's that sense of, like, our work laying the kind of iterative nature of the work of something like Wikipedia, where our work is the groundwork for work for other people to do later, I think is really valuable, and something that I think can really speak strongly to students' investments.
So, I want to just share, I thought about a bunch of things while you guys were talking, just some personal experiences that I've had, and sort of how lucky students are and how lucky the world is to have access to information. We're in most of the world, I mean, not everywhere. Back about a decade ago now, I had the pleasure of going to Russia 2 weeks after the anti-gay propaganda law in Russia. And where you couldn't sing or couldn't put anything about being gay anywhere, or you couldn't have rainbow flags anywhere, or you would be arrested. And my mom is actually on this meeting, and she remembers when I went to Russia. I was giving concerts in Russia, in 10 cities, and our singer was singing about gay love, but he wasn't really singing about gay love. He was just singing about love, but most of the ensemble was gay. And the fact after these concerts, but these people came up to us and thanked us. Oh, thank you so much for being here and for showing us who you are. And now we're doing this really important work on Wikipedia by giving the world access to knowledge about these people who have not been represented. And I sort of reflect back on that experience that I had, and sort of I'm really grateful that we have faculty like yourselves really making a huge impact into the world. And Dan, with your expertise in the African American AIDS epidemic, particularly, it's important to remember that in the Bay Area, where HIV cases are dropping in San Francisco, just across the Bay, HIV cases are rising. And, with that sort of, I wonder, people like Reggie Williams, I wonder what he would, think about what's going on right now, in response to this sort of thing that's happening in the Bay Area, which, what would his work be doing? What was his work for? And so it sort of takes me back to wondering, well, what more can we do? What else is missing? There's still so much more work to be done to really help the AIDS pandemic. Really, it's still going. HIV is still a thing. It's not as how do you say? It's not the killer it was before. People live happily with HIV today, but the fact that we're still seeing cases rise, either for a lack of access to information, things. What can happen then, and what's next? I have a question for everyone on the panel. What challenges have y'all faced doing this work, and how have you navigated those challenges? And I'll go ahead and start with Margaret. Margaret, what challenges have you faced, and how have you navigated those challenges?
I mean, I think the work is difficult, right? Especially I give students like a list of like, here are people who are not represented at all, right? And here are people who are underrepresented. And then I also give them a list of like, here's some examples of people, of cartoonists who are well represented. So you can get a sense of what these like articles look like. But I think, there's a lot of hand-holding you have to do with students to, supervise the process, to, it's a hard thing to write in sort of the Wikipedia style. And so it is something, sometimes also some students are really good at hunting down additional sources. Some students are not. I'm also, I'm at a major research university here at the University of Florida, but there are still, a lot of research databases we don't have access to, including a lot of LGBTQ ones, like the Gale's Archives of Gender and Sexuality is fantastic, but we don't have access to it here. Although I do have personal access through, you can get access through certain LGBTQ archives that have access. But so I'm often doing a lot of legwork and providing a lot of resources to students. And so that's something to think about, is like, what resources do you have? What resources can you provide? How can you draw upon local collections? I also have the challenge of being here in Florida right now, where some of this is, my students are facing challenges in their daily lives getting access to medicine. I have alums who are crowdfunding leaving the state. But it is something that I think the students really recognize the value in these classes and this history, and are, really work hard because they know how important this is, but it is an extra layer of stress in all of our daily lives. Doing this. I do have the privilege of teaching upper division classes, so students self-select in who want to be there, but our classroom space as a safe space, as a space for thinking about LGBTQ lives and histories, means a lot more, and is threatened right now. So it does make the work challenging in a way, that is something that I think a lot of us are thinking about across the US right now, even if we're in places that are relatively safer. I know friends in New York City in the nightlife scene have reported like an uptick of hate crimes, and so it's not like it just happens here in Florida as well. So
thank you. Juana, do you want to, what challenges are you facing doing this? Have you faced doing this work?
Well, I think one of the initial challenges is students believing that they are authorized to edit Wikipedia. They always have this moment. It's like, really? I can do that? I can change Wikipedia? So that's kind of the initial challenge. I think one of my challenges is sometimes working with local archives in terms of media and images. And so I'm really curious about this, how do you get something that you have this great archival copy of something, and how do you get that to sort of illustrate a page? So adding the media, figuring out who owns it. If I take a photograph of a poster from 1972, do I need to find the artist from 1972 that made the poster? Is that like the ethical thing to do? So some of those questions are just some of the challenges that I think I continue to struggle with. The pages that are media rich are so lush. I love them, right? And yet those are kind of hard. Yeah. Some of my students have gone out and like taken a photograph of things. So.
Awesome. And Dean, what about you?
Yeah, I'll again echo everything Margaret and Juana Maria have said. I love that moment of a student being like, "Oh, there's a typo there," and I'm like, "We'll change it." They're like, "Wait, I can?" And I'm like, "Yeah, do it right now. It's fine." But I think a pretty big challenge is it's a challenge, and it's also something that's kind of fundamental to Wikipedia are the notability requirements. And I think in particular, because it can be subjective, I think it can sometimes maybe often get weaponized against minority cultures. And I think that is a struggle where it's, this is a really important thing. The first gay bar in Spain, for example, my students have worked on this page for a really, really long time. In addition to could really struggle to find like archival documents about it. It's not something seen as notable enough, or someone's biography, like Margaret was talking about, getting taken down. And you're like, actually, this is kind of crucial for the study of queer comics, or this is pretty crucial for the study of LGBTQ culture in Spain. And it just takes enough flagging. And I think the sort of sometimes maybe dark side of Wikipedia is that there are kind of like flag warriors out there that will like just go through and mass flag anything under a specific category. I was doing in my project for the Wikipedia Scholars, I was doing a lot of work with adult media, and that is something that there have been whole like pages and pages and pages expunged from Wikipedia, and you can see the sort of traces of them where they used to exist that have now been wholesalely deleted. And in media studies, some of the directors that have had like a critical impact, not just in adult media, but in cinema, have had their pages whitewashed, and just to say like, wow, this a very important director that also directed adult media, it only talks about his non-adult media. And you're like, well, he's not that famous for anything but that. And so I think the notability requirement, while obviously important, can get weaponized, particularly in the terms that we're talking about. And I think that's still a really big challenge, I think, for doing this kind of work.
Well, Dan, I know that you have a slightly different experience. So I wonder, as we move forward, or as you move forward, what kind of challenges do you think you'll face, or what sort of, how would you sort of navigate these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, folks have brought up really, really important like complications to working with Wikipedia. The institution that I'm coming from is one that serves primarily first-generation students, a lot of students who are immigrants or kids of immigrants, and a lot of students who have come up through the Miami-Dade County public school system. And so there's really kind of a variety of levels of preparation, a lot of kind of teaching just kind of basic research skills, right? But the issues of kind of notability, and then as Margaret was talking about, like access to specific databases, that's an issue that I encountered quite a lot at FIU, just, kind of not having access to some important things, important databases and stuff. So just like in all of that, I think there are good opportunities to talk with students critically about how our digital environments are shaped by these kind of underlying values that often aren't explicit. And there's something really, really important and portable and valuable about that, and helping them to think about, the spaces that they navigate every day, through a more critical lens. So I think that's a really excellent takeaway, no matter what what students are doing outside of the class.
Sure, sure. Well, I have one more question for y'all before we move on to the audience Q&A. So this, and of course, I want you to, Dan, I want you to think about it this way as well. So I'll start with Margaret. What advice would you give to someone thinking about teaching with Wikipedia?
Oh, I mean, I would probably, have them look at the Wiki Edu platform. Also, email people, and including the Wiki Edu people. They might be able to connect you with someone else at your university who's taught with Wikipedia before. There's a lot of us out there who've done so. I mean, it's less surprising to me now, but I'll go to like a web page about some really critical feminist text, and you go and you look at the back end of it. It's like edited by students at this university.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that has been done. It is for people. I have a lot of students who are very like tech adverse, right? And they are still able to do this. It does take some hand holding. So I would say have students like work together with each other. For students who are feeling more comfortable, for students who are feeling less comfortable. And I'm also leave time in your classroom for students to work on it actively in the classroom, so you can go and facilitate.
Excellent.
Is really important. Not just having them do it all outside of class. You need to dedicate some space in the classroom for this as well. So
That's great. That's great advice. Also, before I'm going to ask you the same questions of the panelists here, but I will just want to shout out to Ian and Brianda, who are Wiki Education's wiki experts. They do a lot of work to help your students on Wikipedia. Just a quick shout out to them. But Juana, what advice could you give to someone thinking about teaching with Wikipedia?
Yeah, again, so much love for wiki.edu. They just make it so easy. I'll say again, I think there's a lot of work up front, really thinking about what potential articles, what potential figures, having a real sense of what the possibilities are. I am also a big fan of the group work. I'll say, even though there's a lot of work on the front end, there is a way in which these assignments kind of grade themselves. You see exactly how many citations they added. You really get a sense of how much work they put into it. And they work really hard. So every time I've taught this, the students are always going above and beyond. So I would really suggest, again, really thinking beforehand, having some of these possible topics already in your mind, and then really understanding that it's not, they're going to write less. The actual words that they add on Wikipedia is not so many. And so you have to kind of get them out of the habit of like padding their language and actually work against that. So yeah, but wiki.edu, I've used it in different classes with different kinds of assignments, and it's always a hit. I really love working with Wiki Edu.
We're glad you think it's a hit. Thank you, Juana Maria. And Dean, what about you? Any advice you'd give to a brand new instructor teaching with Wikipedia?
Margaret and Juana Maria said the best stuff. I'm trying to think. I mean, I definitely fully agree with Margaret to have classes. I think I did 3 in the fall that were dedicated to, I don't even remember, I just called them like workshops or something. And they came in, they brought their laptops, and we just all worked together. And then I would visit with students, and I had a smaller class, so I was able to do this. And I would visit with students on how they're doing, problems they had. I would encourage them to talk to each other about HTML issues, or which is fairly frequent, or whatever it was. And a lot of problem solving and a lot of work actually happened in those workshops. And like Juana Maria too, I have had students don't know what they don't know, which is what Juana Maria said. And they, if you're like, work on something that's not very known, then they're like, well, we don't know it. So how do we know that we need to work on this? Or how do we know what's notable enough to work on, but is not in Wikipedia, or is like an uncovered, how do we uncover this quote unquote forgotten piece of history that needs to be on Wikipedia? And so there's a lot of legwork up front that I think that the instructor needs to do to kind of create a list of articles to work on, which is now, I don't think that was initially available when I first started on Wikipedia, but that is now something you can do as an instructor, is you give them the list of articles that they can select and assign themselves. And also kind of get them, have them read Wikipedia, because I don't think they've often read it to get something out of it in a very extractive way. And I think to read and understand what Wikipedia sounds like, what it looks like, to kind of read through the history, read through the talk page, like these kinds of things that they can learn to see what went into constructing a page, so that they can understand what they're going to need to do, some of what they're going to need to do in the classroom too. It takes a lot of, somewhat, I think it might've been Margaret, it does take a lot of hand holding, but in the end, they're so happy with the work that they have done so frequently. And they feel so edified by this, like they have made some sort of impact. And I think that is just awesome.
Thank you, Dean. Dan, you had a perspective that you were a student in one of our Scholars and Scientists classes, and you have an expertise in LGBTQ history. And so I want to definitely, in your case, what advice would you give to someone interested in starting to edit Wikipedia?
I think, doing the Scholars Workshop, that was really, really useful for me. Being on kind of the student side of it, I found, the scaffolding of that useful. And that's something that I would recommend anybody doing kind of project-based teaching do, is like heavily scaffold your assignments, echoing like Mark Dean, set aside class time, just so that you can address issues so that students can help each other. It does really go a long way doing an assignment like this. So everything that everyone has said, I think, has been really, really useful.
Thank you. So I'm going to move over now to the Q&A box. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So anyone on the call, if you have any questions for our panelists or about the program, please go ahead and add them to the Q&A box right now. We'll try to get to all of them. We have a question here that says, we've become more and more aware of large language models ingesting Wikipedia and Wikidata and other open information sources. How do you reflect on this, given that you're working with information about vulnerable populations? Is there potential for harm?
I'll just speak to this. I think as we know that Wikipedia is one of the first places that AI goes to mine information. So I actually think it makes the argument for us contributing to that online encyclopedia. I think, for example, I've worked with trans artists that have had concerns like, oh, I don't want my dead name revealed. And I was very pleased to find that Wikipedia actually has guidelines to protect against certain forms of harm. I think specifically in relation to trans people and things like dead names. And so I think that I guess I want to say I trust the Wikipedia community to come up with some ways to protect that. I think we're doing the right thing by making sure that we're getting more sources, more complete and diverse information into Wikipedia. And then I think the Wikipedia community, which is something that I'm just, even though I've done this 5 times, I still feel like a newbie in the talk pages. There is a community that works on projects. And so I think there is like an LGBT hub that is actually thinking about some of these things. And so I want to say I don't trust much, but this is our future. And so I think getting high quality sources in there is really our best bet against more misinformation.
Go ahead, Margaret.
I sort of agree on this. I think one of the things that I do encourage students to do, and I've been doing more with my research, is reaching out to the cartoonists and reaching out to the artists when you can. And if they don't want to be on Wikipedia, okay, we won't, maybe they have reasons they don't want to be on Wikipedia, right? So respecting what they have to say, but also when you do have that page up, even if they're excited about it, give them a chance to read it. And like, I had a artist who reached out to me afterwards, like, I really love this, but it mentions this past partner who I had who was really abusive. Could you remove that line if it's not important? And so like, we removed it, right? And so, because people can't edit their own Wikipedia pages directly. And so thinking of when you're doing that page, you're sort of entering into a partnership, right? And a community partnership, and figuring out how to be like ethically like connected to that community. I think this is something, in terms of the larger AI question, we're going to be seeing it more and more as things evolve and seeing where they go. So I can't really predict exactly where that will go, but I think thinking about, a lot of artists find being on Wikipedia as a specific kind of validation. And so like there was an artist who was already on Wikipedia but didn't have any of her images up there, and she wanted to have the images up there. And as Juana Maria was saying, that the media stuff is so complicated. And so I knew that there was an LGBTQ artist who works as a Wikimedian on LGBTQ comics and cartoonists in general, and knew a lot more than me. And so I was able to connect him to her, and he was able to walk through this artist who I think is in her 70s, of how you upload things under the comments, how you say, I have the copyright, I allow this to be in the comments. And so then she could add this on the page. And for her, that was really validating and very important. Right. And so that's sort of, a side piece to the sort of the larger question.
I want to go ahead and jump to Lane Raspberry's question. Unless you all have something else to add to the previous question. He's asking, can anyone share experiences or observances for random internet Wikipedia editors interacting with students? Good, bad, weird, other? Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say the majority of the interactions, first of all, I think it takes some time for interactions to happen. They don't necessarily, unless you are working with a high traffic page, which I don't necessarily, which the types of pages that we're talking about aren't typically high traffic pages. Corrections or edits to our students' edits wouldn't happen immediately. But when my students have had something sort of reverted or edited or commented on, it's always been generally good. And from the perspective of another Wikipedia editor that actually knows the rules, which my students don't necessarily, or are just kind of barely grasping in a way that is helpful, I think, for them, for those students. And so I haven't had a lot of bad interactions with, my students haven't had a lot of bad interactions, or even really any.
Go ahead, Juana.
I'll just jump in here. I remember one of the first times my students, there was this page, you know, we did this thing where we'll look around to see what exists. And we found this page on homophobia in like communities of color. And we were a little like, well, why homophobia in communities of color and not like anywhere else? I don't know. We thought it was kind of racist, actually. And so we did all of this digging to find out who this person was. And it was like a teenager in the UK. And so that moment where so he was just some random internet Wikipedian who decided to make this page, but discovering that he was this, again, random person, teenager in the UK, kind of gave my students like, oh, if he can do that, then we're certainly authorized to do this. So you know, you never know who's editing. It could be some, you know, 16-year-old somewhere far away. Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah, I want to connect Juana Maria's answer to like the previous question, which is, and to say, you know, to the extent that by editing Wikipedia, we're able to challenge or push back on some of the, you know, we know that Wikipedia can reinforce existing stereotypes, right? Like that's very possible. People are editing it. To the extent that we can challenge or push back on that, I think there's a lot of value in that, recognizing, even though we may have not great feelings about this, you know, that Wikipedia is being used to train AI models. If that kind of content lives on Wikipedia and then gets fed into the model, the large language model is going to regurgitate that back to people. So if we can challenge that at the source, there's a lot of value in that, and ways that we can actually, I think, reduce harm in the way that those models get used.
Yeah, totally. Margaret, you're about to jump in.
Yeah, I think in terms of the interactions with the Wikipedia editors, I'm like, I don't know exactly how, but it feels like a bunch of our stuff last time around, the comic stuff got flagged. But I will say also in those situations, sometimes, you know, a page will, you know, you can't save it from notability, the notability police this time, but every Wiki EDU instance gets an embedded Wiki EDU expert. And I always tell my students, like, you know, this person's, you know, with our class, and they've been super helpful. So there have even been times where that person has edited or added citations or sort of helped the student out really above and beyond, and sort of trying to improve the page to to sort of meet those notability issues that have been raised. But I will say it often is very random what pages are seen as notable or not notable enough. You know, a student does really great work and it gets sort of flagged, and then someone else whose work is okay, but maybe not even written in the style of Wikipedia, but it'll stay up, but then they're still like, it's still there, and it is a moment for students to improve it later. So I would say also, you know, that the support, the embedded support is one of the another benefit too, because that person is a Wikipedia person as well, who knows sort of things ins and outs.
I'll just say, Margaret, that's the story of our lives here at Wiki Education. So, you know, we are at 1 minute right now. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer the other questions in the chat, but I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us today. We are so grateful that Wiki Education is so grateful that we have people like you working with us to improve the quality of knowledge on Wikipedia about LGBTQ topics. Again, I'm grateful. And of course, if anyone is interested, in learning about Wikipedia and learning about teaching with Wikipedia or taking a Scholars and Scientists course in editing Wikipedia, go to teach.wikiedu.org. And for learning how to edit Wikipedia yourself, go to learn.wikiedu.org. Again, thank you again, everyone, so much. Have a beautiful rest of the day. It is the top of the hour. Thank you again. Ciao, ciao.